Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Applin from Atlanta Public Schools PD in Georgia. He is the first chief of police for Atlanta Public Schools PD. He has 37 years total in law enforcement. He's a part of the U.S. Marine Corps Reserves, has degrees from Troy University, has completed doctorate coursework, and is a graduate from the FBI National Academy. You guys, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, Chief Applin.
Well,
Thank you so much
well,
for being.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. I was going through your bio and I was like, wow, how do you find time to do all of these things? Maybe give us just a little bit of insight, how you got started. 37 years is a long time, what your career trajectory has looked like. And I
Right.
do need you to answer that question. How did you find time to do all of these things?
Well, I needed something to do. I guess I was a little bored, right? So I had to find something to do. I've been when I started in law enforcement, I just turned 20. Well, I'm sorry, I just turned 21. I was 20 the day I started with the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, and 21 was the next day. Um, but I think ever since then, I was thinking about what could I do to elevate myself? How do I make myself better, more marketable? Um, really, for the sheriff's office, I wanted to be the sheriff. That was my goal. And I remember thinking and looking at different things, qualifications for different positions for leadership, things like that. And I said, okay, these are the things that I want to do. And so I started tracking towards that. So it was get my degree, you know, get as much training as I could get, FBI Academy, anything that I could that I saw where a lot of other chiefs were doing or sheriffs were doing to help bolster their position. I
Mhm.
thought about it and said, hey, I need to start doing those things. I started tracking towards making those things happen. Fortunately, my wife and my family have been very forgiving. There's been a lot of times that I haven't been able to spend with them, but at the same time, there've been a lot of good times that been able to spend together. As a result of just kind of just really being intentional about taking time and spending time with them. But it's been tough. I think lately, you talk about the time that it takes. We were talking earlier about the work. I mean, the work starts at it's 24/7. We're responsible, but we see a large volume of work that starts at 7 and it keeps going until about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But we're working throughout the day. It's 24/7. So making time, I just make it. I just recognize that something needs to be done, and I really just put forth the effort to try to make that happen.
I love it. I think there are a few things that you said I want to circle back to, but I think it's really smart to look at the people around you who you want to emulate, the people who
Exactly.
are doing things really well, and how can you strive to be that and to better yourself.
Exactly.
There have been times in my career, in my life where I've actually pivoted because I've looked around and I'm like, who's doing it really well? Who do I want to be like?
Mhm.
And then I realize there's no one who I want to be like. I'm like, I might not be in the right place. You got to find that space where you have people that you look up to and you're like, wow, I want to be like that guy or that girl. And what
Exactly.
are what are the
Exactly.
things? It's almost like reverse engineering. Okay, what are the things I need to do to get there? And I'm curious if you think that because you had that really early on, you kind of looked around and said, "Hey, I want to be sheriff one day. What do I need to do to get there?" And I'm gonna put forth the effort to do it. Do you think that having those goals, those long-term goals, and that self-advancement that you did throughout your career helped you to prevent burnout and to create that longevity?
Yeah, I think the goals is what's significant. For years, I've taken classes or I've been in schools and where they talk about you got to have mid range,
Yep.
immediate, long range goals, and never really put it together. Never really thought about how significant that was. So when I say I want to be the sheriff, and if I do the research and try to understand what it takes to be the sheriff, then it gives me another path to work on those things to help me get to that point. So that was very significant. And while I probably would never be a sheriff today, I'm happy being the chief of police. It definitely put me in a position to where able to do what I'm doing today. It definitely set me up for that. So all those things that I did, I went to school, as much training as I could get, try to get as much experience as I could, leaned in heavily on colleagues who were in certain positions, and made a big difference. It definitely makes life easier today in the
Yeah.
role that I'm in right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on the goals, and I think anyone who's listening can probably relate to times where you didn't have goals, and you were like kind of in the trenches and you're so inundated with the day-to-day grind. It's really hard to see the clearing after the trees if
It
you are
is.
like in the grind all the time. And so I do agree with you. I think and I also think that you have to have the confidence in yourself that you can get there. And that was something that I had to work on a lot in my life because I didn't know that I could dream that big. I didn't know,
Right.
my whole life I was told that like I wouldn't amount to anything. And so I had to elevate that bar for myself as to what was even possible. And I had a lot of people who'd ask me that. They're like, what are your dreams? Like, what are your long-term goals? And I'm like, I don't know. I was always like so scared to dream big. But I think you have to. You have to build the
Exactly.
confidence to say, like, I one day, and it might, even when you say it, it's sometimes maybe like for me, like, I'll say things now that like maybe I don't quite believe yet, but the more I say it, I believe in myself that I can get there. And you
Exactly.
have to have that ability to dream. And that is going to be the guiding light that gets you through that forest.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think about just a number of things that I've done over the years, and just recently. I ran my first marathon last year, last March, and I remember running the. So it was part of the Atlanta Track Club. It's called the Ultimate Peach. So I remember running the Peachtree Road Race. A good friend of mine was like, "Well, you should try to do the Triple Peach." And the Triple Peach is a Peachtree Road Race, a 10 miler, and a half marathon.
Mm.
And I got to the half marathon. I was thinking, "Oh, this is it." And and my friend was like, "Hey, what about the Ultimate Peach?" I said, "What is that one?" "That's for the marathon." I was like, I never do that, but I I trained every day. Every day, I would five. I'm sorry, 5 days out of the week. I knew that I needed to run. I need to do something to prepare myself for that marathon. And if it were not for that, if I had not didn't have that in place where I was tracking and actually doing everything I needed to do to get to that point, I could have never made it. And so I was able to run my first marathon as a result. And I say first because I'm 57 and not just decided to run my first marathon. It's like
Yeah.
that's crazy. But just thinking about the planning and the intentional, being intentional about preparing myself for it, really doing the research, understanding what it is needed in order for me to get there. It's the same thing with goals and being in leadership or anything that you want to do, but having an understanding as much as you can about what's required to get there is going to be important, and then actually doing it
Yeah.
is big. It's real big. I mean, so if you've ever ran before in your life, um, like I say, I went through Marine Corps boot camp, probably the most challenging military branch in the U.S. Right, this marathon was probably the most physically and mentally challenging thing I've ever done before in my life, and I could not have done it if I didn't have a goal to get that 26.2 miles, and I didn't have a plan to get me there. So
Yeah.
that's been real important. That's been real important.
I appreciate that you talked about the physical training side of things, but you also said the mental training side of things. And I think what sometimes we forget is that when we accomplish hard things, when we do hard things, we now know that we have the ability to do hard things.
Things
Right?
exactly,
So the more hard things you do, the more hard things you can do, and it builds that confidence, it builds that resiliency. So now that you've ran a marathon, not only do you know that you can do it, now you're like, well, can I do more? I know I
exactly,
can do this. Can I do more? How can I keep elevating that bar for myself? And I think at the end of the day, we all want to look back on our life and be proud of what we accomplished, to look back and
exactly,
be like, man, I did that. And
exactly.
that was great, and I'm so proud of that, whether that's personally or professionally. And so how can we position ourselves to be able to physically train, to mentally train, to keep raising that bar of what is possible in our lives. I think
And
that's worthwhile.
I agree with that. And I think that a lot of times we look at some you have to be grateful for the good and the bad times.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of times we wish we'd never been through something that was difficult, but I think it says something in a person who is willing to go through the hard stuff because it builds them, it builds a capacity for them to be able to deal with, like you said, with hard things.
Hmm.
Getting comfortable with being uncomfortable
Hmm.
puts you in a place where everything's possible, right? We know that being a chief of police, if I just started out, I'm 21 years old, and being a chief of police is something that's going to take some time. But during that time is going to be you're going to have good times, you're going to have bad times, you're going to have challenges. It's going to be easy, but they all come together to help you be better, be that much better.
Yeah.
But be grateful for the challenges too. We have to be grateful for that.
I agree 100%. I almost now, and I think when I was younger, I didn't see it that way. When I
Yeah,
was
sure,
younger, I
sure,
think I definitely
sure.
was like, boo me, but I think now I almost like, I'm definitely grateful, but I almost like welcome it more because I've
Exactly.
never been through something hard that I haven't learned from it or I haven't grown from it. And I don't want to be the same. I don't want, like every year, I want to be better. I want to be different. I think sometimes when we think of change, we think that change is bad, but change can be really good.
It
How
can be.
can we evolve over time? And so I agree with you. I think that we sometimes have so much fear around failure that we don't take action when really the failure is where we're able to build our success because we learn from it and that's how we get to the other side of it.
Makes you stronger.
So being
Makes you
more
stronger.
open to failure. Um,
Right.
I did
Right.
want to talk a little bit about, some of the things that you're doing now, because when I talk to you offline, it's really apparent how passionate you are about school policing
Mhm.
and the things that you're doing right now in your organization. Like I said in your bio, so you are the first chief of police for Atlanta Public School
Right.
PD. And
That's
you
correct.
guys are the second largest police force in Georgia, which most people maybe wouldn't realize that.
They would not. They would
What
not.
what does school safety and wellness look like for you, and why are you so passionate about what you're doing today?
It is a never-ending job, I can tell you that. I mean, is everything that, you know, everything that it takes to make sure at the end of the day that our students can come to school and be comfortable in an environment so that they can learn. We
Mm,
want them to be focused on that. We want our teachers to come to school so they have to focus on, dealing with fights, dealing with, guns, dealing with things like that, dealing with threats, so that they can focus on teaching. If we can create an environment where teaching and learning can happen without the violence, without the distractions that we can control, then our kids are going to be that much better off. They have a greater opportunity for success. They'll be. I tell Atlanta police this all the time. I say, look, we're trying to do things to keep you from having to deal with them when they graduate. We want them to graduate, be responsible as citizens and adults, and so that you don't have to deal with them. So anything we can do to try to make sure that they have what they need to be successful, and not be impacted by those distractions is what we try to do. And we do a lot. We do so much for our kids. And when I say we as a district, we do quite a bit for our kids. I mean, but as a department, one of the things that we were very intentional about was making sure that we didn't add to this prison school to prison pipeline, right? We wanted to make sure we weren't part of that. We weren't a part of that. And so when we took over in 2016 and 2017, we went back and looked at the data and found that we had reduced the number of students who were charged with crimes in half,
wow.
over half. And so my goal has been, how do I make that lower? I want to get to zero. How do I get to zero? Well, it's not possible. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to deal with kids in certain ways. We have to charge them, but what can we do to help them get to that point? And it wasn't just the students. Sometimes it's the adults. I mean, as police officers, we're trained to do things a certain way. I taught at the police academy, And I know that I taught all my recruits to be warriors. That's what I want them to be, warriors. I want you to go to work. If somebody, does something they have no business doing, you deal with it. But I also want you to make it home. But here is more of a guardian approach.
Mhm.
You have to have that warrior side too, but we want you to be a guardian because our kids they're still maturing. There are a lot of things that they have to go through and experience before they can really be held responsible for some of their actions. And think about you as a kid. Think about when you were in school. If you ever got into a fight, or if you knew someone who got into a fight, should they go to jail for that? Think about that. It's like, why are we sending kids to jail for fighting when, honestly, that's what kids do sometimes. They do get into fights, they get into things like that. But we have to create opportunities so that they have an opportunity to make a mistake and correct that mistake. And so preparing our officers for that was another thing. So we were very intentional about what we provided them. I think of it like the Matrix. If you ever saw, there's a part in the Matrix where the very first one, the Matrix, where he plugs in and he says, I want to learn karate," and they program him for karate. And he said, "I want to learn how to fly a helicopter." They program him. I wish we could do that, but unfortunately we don't have that luxury, right? So one of the things that we require for every officer, several things we require for every officer who comes on board. We recognize you were policing all these years. Now you want to come and work with kids. We have to give you the tools to be able to deal and interact with kids. So that means the training that we provide kind of sets the tone. We're telling you this is where we're going. Now you can either get on board or you can go on and do something else. But at the end of the day, we want to get you training in crisis intervention team so you can recognize disorders. And then when you interact with a kid who has displayed some of those symptoms or those signs, that you deal with them differently instead of arresting them. It's in the field. I can remember times when someone called me a name, they cursed me out. I'd take them to jail for disorderly conduct. Can't do that with kids. But the second I do that, I'm setting a course for them that's going to destroy them, that potentially, more than likely, is going to destroy them for the rest of their lives. The second I introduce that kid to the criminal justice system, their chances are very difficult of getting out of it. So if I can recognize that a kid has a certain disorder, I can deal with them differently. So I give them other tools for that. Mental health first aid, so that they understand when people are in crisis. So every day we're dealing with kids who are in a mental health crisis. And I hear on the radio twice today where we reached out to our local provider, Grady Health Services. They have a crisis response team, so we're calling those guys in to help support us when it comes to kids who are having crisis. So being able to recognize that instead of taking that as an act um, um, of disobedience and arresting or charging or suspending them, we're doing something different. And then one other thing we teach is restorative practices. So we know that kids are going to get in trouble. We know they're going to do something wrong. What can we do to change that? And restorative practices gives us some tools to work with so that we can have conversations with kids and talk to them about what the expectations are and and track them from the moment that they make these mistakes to a point where we see them understand and appreciate what the victim has gone through as a result of their actions, what the police has gone through as a result of their actions, what everybody has to deal with. And hopefully they understand that and come to a point where they're doing something different. So we're not taking them to jail for that. Instead, we're working on ways to correct that. So it's just that's just scratching the surface. Just so many steps we try to take to try to make sure that our kids get what they need in order to be successful citizens.
Thank you. You're really like speaking close to my heart. I don't know if I shared with you offline or if you knew this about me, but I grew up with an incarcerated parent. My parents
Oh
were
wow.
drug addicts. Um, my best hope, like my family was just like, best case scenario for you is that you don't end up like them. Like that was the bar for me. And when you can start to recognize, because I was getting in trouble, I was acting
Mhm.
out, there
Mhm.
was a time of rebellion for me when I was in school. And I think if you can recognize that hurt people,
Yeah.
and what is going on beneath the surface. I love that you said a guardian approach or a mentorship type of approach. Like, how can we take care of these kids so that they have a better shot at a future? Especially the kids that are, maybe acting out, which I can relate to that. I had a
Right.
really hard upbringing. There's a lot of domestic violence, a lot of drug use. Like, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to grow up and feel like there's no shot for you, and to have
Hmm. Hmm.
self-worth issues and all that stuff. And then how that manifested in my behavior and my actions. I don't think that I was a bad person, but I was making poor decisions because I was hurting, and so for you
Right.
to recognize that and say, how can we help these kids and how can we try to give them a better shot at the future where they know that they are capable of doing better, that there is another option, that they don't
Exactly.
have to choose that
Exactly.
path, that is going to send them to, prison someday, and
Exactly.
I really appreciate that approach because I think that for me, I didn't have a lot of mentors in my life. I didn't feel like I had a lot of people looking out for me. I
Hmm.
had my stepdad that raised me as a single dad, and I don't know where I would be without him. But I think having more people like you and your team out in the community spreading the message of like, hey, like we want to show you what you're capable of and we want to
Right.
be here to support you, I think is great.
Appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you for what you're doing. I like try not to get emotional on the podcast, but I definitely was you're playing with my heartstrings a little bit on
Oh
that
my goodness.
because I
Okay.
think about it though. I think about, so many times like it could have gone either way, and luckily, we talked about failure and mistakes and I don't think I'd be as passionate about wellness and what I do today if I hadn't had gone through those things.
Fair
Um,
enough. There we go.
but yeah, it makes me feel really good that there are people like you guys who are out in the community really trying to make a better life and impact. I know you said some of the qualities that you're training for, and that you're really focused on safety and wellness within the community that you serve. But you are also a health and wellness instructor, and I know that you guys are really focused on how can you also support your organization's safety and wellness. What are some of the things that you guys are doing internally to make sure that the helpers are good so that they can do the good work within the community that they serve?
Right. I mean, we have room for growth. I'll be honest with you. I started researching other agencies and seeing what they're doing and for their officers. And I tell you, we got some room for growth for sure. I'll start there. I think for one is just being honest about my personal health, what I'm dealing with.
Mm,
About a year and a half ago, I had a meeting with the team and I started sharing with them. And this was before I started training for the marathon, and maybe 2 years ago. Just started sharing with them how if you go back and look at some of my pictures, my earlier pictures, I got up to 263 pounds,
yeah.
and just being just honest with everybody. I'm standing in front of my team. I said, look, I was pre-diabetic. I've had high blood pressure, um, high cholesterol. I was overweight, weighed 263 pounds, and I had to do something different. Um, and it's not about my personal health, but I recognize being in this business, dealing with all the stressors that we deal with, we try to find ways to deal with stress, and sometimes it's not the most healthiest way, not the healthiest way. We might be drinking, it might be eating, it could be you name it, anything that you have no business doing, you end up doing it. But standing in front of the team and talking about that and sharing with them my journey and what I experienced and what I went through and what I did to get, to work my way out of it. I still have room for growth, right? I still need some work with that, but what I had to do to get out of it and just really encouraging them, you know, you get a physical every year. Make sure you get your blood checked. Make sure you check your A1C. Make sure you check your collection, get your cholesterol checked. Um, Make sure you're doing those physicals once a year. You get that for free. We have employee assistance, and one of the great things at Atlanta Public Schools that they've done this year that different from last year. Last year with EAP, you only got no year before last, you only got 7 sessions. Now it's unlimited sessions. And I'm
Mm,
like, that's a game changer. That's real big. But again, getting them to that point is one of the things that like I said, we do a little bit, not enough. What I want to work on. I look at examples of some agencies that are requiring their officers once a year to sit down with a counselor. They can go in and say nothing at all, but you got to go, right? At least get them into the door, and maybe and hopefully they'll have a conversation and they can resolve some potential issues. So that one of the things I want to work on is getting to that point. But right now, just offering up the experiences that I've had, talking about some of the things that I've dealt with, being honest about that, and sharing, being very transparent with some of the things that I've experienced over life and how all those things impact me today. You know, all those things, if they go unchecked, how impactful they can be negatively to a person. I read a book called "The Body Keeps the Score." I don't know if you ever heard of
Yeah,
that.
I have.
The
Yeah,
Body
yeah.
Keeps the Score. Yeah,
Read it.
one of the books I've read, and it just really opened my eyes to how the trauma that I've experienced in the past and never addressed it, and how it potentially has impacted me today with everything, whether it's mental health, whether it's my physical health, how I interact with people, things like that, and being able to um, get to a point of understanding, and just start sharing with my team why that your physical and mental health is important has been big. We lost an officer just was it before just before the pandemic, just before, that in January. I got a call January the 1st that one of my officers passed. He was out with his friends. He um he went unconscious, and they tried to resuscitate him. They weren't able to, and it really just tore me up. It just really just ripped me apart. And one of the things I remember talking to his relatives was about his health. He said he had gone to the doctor a few weeks before then. He had some issues or dealing with some issues, but understanding things like that, that knowing that the consequences of our actions, of what we decide to do, could be that. It could be
Mm.
the bad, the health issues that we're facing, the mental health issues that we're facing. But again, just really just trying to share with my teams. Again, starting with transparency, being transparent about myself, and hoping that they see that, look, I'm being honest about what I'm dealing with. You should at least take a look at that, and then bringing to bear the resources that we have internally to help guide them and point them into a direction. Hopefully, it will help them with that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying like, hey, it starts with me sharing my
Mhm.
stuff. I think that we really undervalue just talking about our own lived experiences and
Mhm.
how that can
Mhm.
inspire and educate other people. And I know that sometimes, and I've been there too, where it's maybe scary or, you don't want to share things that are personal with other people. I understand how that might feel, but I don't think that our challenges and our stories and the things that we've been through are our weaknesses. I think that there are superpowers. It's
Agreed.
our way to bring awareness and inspire other people to take action in their lives and to know that they're not alone. If we just bury everything and we put on this perception that we're perfect, it's incredibly unrelatable. And now the people who are struggling with things are like, well, no one else seems to be struggling. I must be the only one. And it makes things worse. And my hope is that, regardless, I think so. I'm going to preface this with I think that we should always celebrate the wins. Like, I think that
Sure.
accomplishments, we should always celebrate those things. I don't think that we always need to be like, you know, self assessing all the things that could be better. But I do think, or my hope is that no matter how many, like down the road, no matter how many bells and whistles and resources that any organization has, that the conversation is always how can we do better? I think we always need to be asking ourselves, no matter how far we've come, are there opportunities for us to do more or to be better or to do things differently? And it's an ever evolving conversation. It's not a destination, it's a journey. So
Agreed.
I
Agreed.
appreciate you sharing the things that you went through. And I do think that by having these conversations, it allows other people to like take a breath and be like, okay, like Chief's gone through it too.
Exactly.
And now
Exactly.
Chief's doing these things to like better himself. Now I want to do those things to better
There we go.
myself too.
There we go. Trying to set an example for them to follow. And you're right. I think sometimes I have to realize or understand that people do emulate me, right? I do, and I think even some of the bad things for them. You know, as a chief, I know I'm on the job 24/7. That's the way I take it.
Mm,
But I start thinking about my command staff and my other officers who are trying to be on the job just like me 24/7. I have to remind them, look, you don't have to do this. There's not. I didn't intend for you to follow this. I'm the chief, and unfortunately, whatever happens on any shift, I'm responsible at the end of the day. Not for you to do. I'm not expecting you to do that. So being able to share with my team that it's not an expectation for them to do exactly as I do. Try to be on the phone, monitor everything that's happening 24/7 outside their shifts, on their off days, things like that. That's not my intention. So those are unintended circumstances that I have to really get out in front of and talk with my team about, make sure they understand, look, that's not what I'm looking for you to do.
yeah.
So setting those expectations have been helpful too, just realizing that.
Yeah. I had a conversation with another chief one time, and he was very much the same in the sense that like he was always working. He like loved it. Excuse me. And there was this kind of question mark of like, when is it healthy versus unhealthy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when do we need to reel it back? And I think the conclusion that we came to, because I also work all the time, like I'm working until 10 o'clock at night, like I'm on my computer, I don't work, I work on the weekends, like I'm on vacation, I'm answering emails, like so like I understand always
Mm-hmm.
being on.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what I do. And I do think that there are times where I do have to reel it back a little bit and I have to focus on myself or my family or, whatever that is. But the conclusion that we came to was, why are you doing these things? Are you doing these things because you love it? Are you doing it in a healthy way? Do you still have, positive interactions with your family and you're prioritizing, yourself and your home life? Because two things can exist at once. You can work a lot and also take care of yourself and your family. I think the challenge comes when you're doing it to escape your reality or and this could be for
Great.
anything. And so
Great.
we talk about this with like simple examples like the conversation of drinking, and it's like, okay, like,
Mm-hmm.
are you having a glass of wine on a date night with your spouse and it's something that's really positive and you're unwinding or whatever, or are you drinking a whole bottle every single night because you're trying to escape and numb and avoid a situation?
Agree.
Are we
Right.
working too much because we're avoiding something or because we're passionate and we love it and we still have a healthy balance? So I think those are the questions to ask ourselves too. And I think that it's okay. You got where you are because of your work ethic and the grit and the grind. And so I think that people can strive to have some of those qualities as long as it's in a healthy way.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree. Agree wholeheartedly. Agree
So a
wholeheartedly.
couple of things. I know we're kind of gonna butt up on time. I feel like I could talk to you for 2 hours, but I wanted to highlight some of the things that you guys are doing organizationally that I thought were really cool because I don't know if I've ever spoken to anyone who works in school policing that has all of these things. And then
Okay.
maybe you can just kind of touch on a couple of them that have been really successful. But you guys have canines, you have drones, you have detectives. You do a lot of community engagement. One of the things that you said was books and badges, where the officers read to the students, right? Um,
Right.
and then you
Right.
have mentorship and coaching, and you do a lot within the community. And, I have, my opinions on this, but I think that all of those things are related to wellness and,
Sure.
fulfillment within the career. But can you just talk about a couple of those things and, the success you've had?
Yeah. So I'm gonna books and badges. I'll talk about that. I think that has been an initiative with our social and emotional learning department here in APS, and we take some books that are age appropriate for groups that we want to read to. It's basically elementary, and so we'll we got we got together, talked about which books would be appropriate. So every month we would have a book of the month. So that book of the month, we try to get an officer in a classroom with a specific grade in every elementary school.
I love it.
And so this is our third or fourth year, third or fourth year. And so I saw that it was so much for just our officers. I reached out to all the jurisdictions that impact Atlanta Public Schools. That was, and I may miss some that they'll be upset with me. Georgia State Patrol, Atlanta Police, GBI, the DA's office, the solicitor's office, um, we haven't quite tapped in the FBI, but they express interest. So just think about all the different agencies: the Georgia World Congress Center, Georgia State University, Georgia Tech, all these all these police departments that impact Atlanta public schools, trying to get an officer into the classroom to have a non-custodial conversation with a kid. What about a conversation where you're not under arrest, your parents are not under arrest, we're not writing your ticket, we're reading. So we're doing something very different than what people expect from us, and it has been a great experience for us. It gets to a point now. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it gets a bit. We have so much stuff going on. It's like we're doing books and badges this month, but we make time for it. We recognize that we need to.
Mm.
We also recognize that when it comes to reading, that some kids, the kids at a certain grade level, if they're not reading on the, I can't remember how the research went, if they're not reading on a third grade level, and when they're in the third grade, the chances of being successful in life or the chances of being involved in crime increases. And
Mm.
so this is another way for us to fight crime. It may not be something that we see immediate impact, but hopefully down the road, we will see an impact on that. Number one, kids' interest in reading. Number two, interacting with police officers. Every day we see where adults are having problems with the police. We're seeing stuff now in the media with law enforcement where people are having issues. But if we can create an environment now where kids grow up dealing with officers in environments outside of policing, outside of that custodial conversation, just the possibilities are just, unimaginable, right? I mean, we could do a lot with that.
I
So
love that.
just understanding, I couldn't give you any data that says, the police officers reading to a kid makes them better readers. I can't give you data on that, but I know if it's something that's done consistently and constantly, it's going to make a big difference for that kid. And
Yeah.
then also sitting in front of sitting in the classroom with an officer, having a conversation with them about stuff other than policing, other than my mom's going to jail, my dad's going to jail. That's a big deal. So that's been something that we've really been leaning into a little bit more lately. So that's one of the many things that we've been involved with. But that's one I really enjoy doing. It's probably one of the best parts of my job is sitting in front of a kid, in front of kids and reading. It's
I
been real
love
good,
that.
real good.
I love that. I love how you're trying to build trust and safety and positive interactions as early as possible. But that was the thing that you just said that popped into my head when you first were explaining this is that from the officer perspective, how cool to remind yourself of the good things, and the positive impact that you're having. Like, uh, I think that there's nothing more fulfilling than seeing the impact that you have on other people and
Mhm.
especially kids. Like they're excited to see you, you get to
Exactly.
go in there and just be reminded of the good parts of the world and of humanity and the impact that you're making on a day-to-day basis, I think is so important for mental health. Because if we're always inundated with the hard things, the stressful things, the bad things, we have to have the counter to that. So that was what popped into
Right.
my head. I'm like, what a
Right.
cool way to like pop in there and be like, oh yeah, there's good in the world and
Exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
helping.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree.
For the younger generation, so the younger men and women who are coming into this career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them?
Oh wow. There's so many things I could share, but I think taking care of yourself now, not waiting until you're in your 40s and 50s. Start now and do the research on how to stay healthy physically, how to stay healthy mentally. Do it now because it it so for a lot of us it takes time to get into bad shape, and we can always we can change that, but it's a struggle. It's very hard. The older you get, the more challenging it is to try to take the weight off, to try to change your behavior so that you're doing something different. But start now. That's what I would say. Just don't wait. Don't wait. Start now and stay consistent. That's going to make a big difference. You pay dividends as you get older. And I see that in some people. I see that in some people today. Some people who are my age and who are doing very well physically, at least it appears to be doing well mentally. They decided a long time ago that they're gonna take a appropriate steps to make sure that they take care of themselves both physically and mentally. So start early, start now, and be consistent. How about that?
Love it. Thank you, Chief Applin. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for
Well,
coming
thank
on.
you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course.